Hey everybody, my name is Dustin Siggins with Brandon and Lindsay here, and we're going to talk about how to get out of the shadows as a PR person, especially when people are looking for work, they're looking for business, trying to figure out their next path, and how we have each used LinkedIn as part of our own journeys here. Brandon, take it away.
Sure. Well, thank you. Good to meet you, Lindsay. This is the first time we're speaking.
Yeah.
Dustin, we've talked quite a bit, so we've
Yeah.
been on this journey together in some ways. But yeah, quick story from my background. So I guess the best way to sum it up is I created a Twitter account in 2007 and I have 300 followers. So that tells you how much I use social media. So, so I obviously use it to track journalists, but you can tell just by those stats, right? It's not something I prioritize. And really, only in the past year and a half or so, I've taken it seriously for myself. So obviously, ran social media for clients, done corporate stuff, grown them to millions of followers, done all that stuff for companies. But I've just been so anti-personal social media. Even wrote about it for some tech blogs back in the day about how anti-social I was for PR. So I'm kind
Sure.
of, I'm kind of changing my tune here. Obviously, things have changed, but that's why I'm here. I was skeptical at first. I wanted to focus on clients, but now I finally realized you can't sit on the sidelines anymore. You have to be out there in a way that works for you. So that's my intro.
Great. Yeah, I mean, I'm in a similar situation, right? I PR agency most of my career, then transitioned to in-house. So it's basically making my executives look good on LinkedIn, our company look good on social media. I've done it all. And then I left my job in November, so a few months ago. And as I started looking on LinkedIn, what I thought was just going to be looking for jobs, it became very clear to me that this is not the way that it was when we were looking for jobs, maybe, 4 years ago, which would have been the last time that I was
Sure.
looking, and that it was an opportunity to really establish who I was. And I remember having a conversation with a friend of mine, and she said, just do for yourself what you would do for clients. And I mean, it makes so much
Right.
sense, but
Yes,
it's so
exactly.
hard to do it, and it's so obvious. So,
Yep.
yeah, so I would say I was a little bit skeptical, but I also quickly realized, and became a little overwhelmed by all the advice out there about what to do to, get the algorithm to work in your favor, to make sure that your posts are showing and all those types of things. So I've just really been exploring a lot of different options, and I'm really excited to have this conversation and learn from you both as well and share what I've learned as well.
And so my story is a little bit different. Before I was in PR, I was a blogger back when blogging was a thing. And so I've always kind of been my own brand. I got into PR because in 2011, I was 26 making $40,000 living in Alexandria, Virginia, which doesn't go very far. And friends with great ideas who couldn't get in the press. I was like, well, I'm getting myself into A, B, and C outlet writing at 11 p.m. for no pay. Let me just do it for you for $100, $200, which seemed like big money at the time. And so that's how I got into PR. But what I've learned, and Christine and I had a conversation about this, is so many PR people have, just like most journalists, have been behind the scenes. It's hard to then take yourself out of that. I should be in the shadows because that's your career. I was the face of my own brand. And even when I was a journalist, I often did commentary and other things. So I've always been my own brand. So I think it's been easier for me to write thought leadership op-eds, post on LinkedIn. And so for me, this has been a very systematic journey to try to gain sales. But along the way, Brandon, as I understand it, your strategy, your goal is to have fun and experiment and throw stuff out there.
Yeah.
My first post that went kind of viral was I shared one of yours. I think I threw 5 sentences into it, and
Mhm.
suddenly I got 8,000 impressions or something, and 100 new followers in the industry. But you've said that your next step, Brandon, is to start engaging with other people more. You've mastered the posting, you've figured that out, and you get a lot more engagement than I do. Your posts on average are getting 2 or 3 times what I get, and I've done like all the rules. So I'd be interested to see what you have found works for you on the kind of content you're putting out that fits your voice, how you develop your voice.
Yeah, no. So it's been a long journey. So I mean, I've written for myself, kind of like what you said. I used to be a blogger and wrote freelance for magazines. So I've done a lot of that stuff, but nothing on social, right? So
I see.
taking that voice and that communication and bringing it to a social audience. But yeah, I inherited the social media team at Storyblock where I work about a year and a half ago. And I was like, you know what? If they're under me, yes, I've done it for a corporate environment, but if they're with me, I have to be doing this too. Like I have to actually be out there and practice what I preach. So that's what really kicked me off to start taking it seriously. I thought I was going to hate it and I started to love it. And my secret is I mean, I've read all the books, followed all the algorithm tips, but really you just be openly honest and wrap some humor in it and be self-deprecating, right? Make fun of yourself. That is the best equation I've found so far.
Mhm.
And engagement has been great. Follower growth is steady, not tremendous. You know, it's not a
Sure.
Becca or Perry over here. It's a lot of more of a slow burn. But
Sure.
yeah, I mean, one thing that's been fascinating to me too is as I've grown incrementally, I'm reposting stuff from 6 months ago, word for word. Like I just am going through my timeline and I'm pulling out the ones I'm
Wow.
not totally embarrassed by. So Monday to Friday, I typically write something original. Saturday and Sunday, I schedule something
Mm.
recycled from months ago. But that has been crazily effective for me. So for instance, there's been a
Hmm.
couple that got 20, 30 likes when I posted them 6 months ago. Repost them now. One of them got 2,000, almost 2,000 likes, engagements out of nowhere. So it just shows you how random all this stuff is.
Right.
Stuff that didn't work 6 months ago might work again now. It's evergreen. So I'm just
Yep.
playing around with formats, but really I have nothing to, I represent my company's Storyblok, obviously, but personally, I'm not selling anything. I have no
Sure.
agenda, no course. So I can be as honest as I want to be after 20 years of experience and just be honest. But I love to make fun of myself and I love to insert humor where I can. And that makes it fun and makes it something I keep doing. So that's my main approach, I say.
And I think some of your best stuff is really pithy. You do a phenomenal job of, stepping up on the box, one sentence, stepping down now. And I think you've really mastered that pithy post that gets a lot out there. I think I've actually cited you as somebody who does thought leadership in 2 sentences.
I try. Yeah, but I mean, it's a different approach. I mean, Dustin, your stuff is extremely thoughtful, and I think that comes from the contributed article thought leadership side. Like my stuff is a little more off the cuff, and but
Right.
you have very deep insights. So and that's where it's what's sparking your engagement. So Lindsay, I'm still new to your content, so I'm excited to
Yeah.
hear how maybe we could go to you if that's okay,
Yeah.
and hear how
Yeah, definitely
you
pivot to Lindsay.
are
Yeah,
doing
no,
that.
that's great. So it's so funny because I actually took the reverse approach where I am trying to engage on existing
Cool.
conversations first, just to see,
Mhm.
because I felt like from my perspective and transparency, I'm in the process of looking for a new job, but I also had my own PR and marketing firm for years. So,
Mhm.
maybe that's an alternative. So I haven't gone really hard in the paint in either direction. So that does cause some content confusion on my part when I'm thinking about what I want to talk about. So, my
Sure.
strategy has really been to comment on existing posts and interact with people that way.
Hmm.
I feel like it's kind of interesting because there are people who are more willing to engage in the comments, Dustin, you being one of them, right? That's kind of how
Sure.
we started.
That's how we
Right,
met.
and
Yeah.
again, new to your content, but I've been following you for a while.
Right.
But there aren't as many people who want to get into the conversation and maybe are just posting for the posting purpose, right? And the sort
Sure.
of impression. So I have sort of done a lot of tests with my own content and trying to do the thought leadership. I probably overthink it a little bit because the algorithm is such that you're seeing the content that you've picked and it's all going
Right.
to be similar people to you, right? So they're all talking
Yep.
about the same thing, right? When
Right.
Poppy got acquired and this sort of news broke on Friday, and then it was sort of
Hmm.
everybody's gonna be talking about it because we're all in
Right.
the brand world. So,
Right.
and then you're like, oh, well, everybody's already talking about it. So what can I offer to it? But my approach has sort of been to try to get involved in conversations. I feel like there are people who are more willing to do that. And so now I'm sort of taking the more post first approach and just sort of not overcomplicating it. And I do this all the time for executives that I work for
Right.
and people I
Right.
work for, so it should just roll right out there. But yeah, it's been interesting a little, it's been interesting to sort of test and evaluate different approaches to it.
The thing that I've learned the most, I think, and I've taken a very systematic approach because we are aiming for sales and through my
Hmm.
company and posting is our primary lead generator, right? Or not, I shouldn't say posting, but going through LinkedIn.
Sure.
But when we were stuck back in the summer, my colleague Jalissa and I, we just kind of worked out a process. We found the 15 most viral posts in the industry, and combed through thousands and thousands of engagements to then find the 200 people who were in our target audience, right? And then we connect with those people, shoot a direct message over. It was a very systematic approach. But we got really stuck. We had grown from me doing 100 impressions to 3, 4, 500 per post. And everything died in July and August. And I thought maybe it was the conventions, July 4th, the attempted assassination of then candidate Trump. And then we connected with this woman, Molly, with Three Rivers Marketing. Molly just said, "Oh, you guys are posting 3 times a day. The algorithm likes 1 a day because LinkedIn added 1 billion users and they flattened the algorithm."
Mhm.
Just that first piece of advice from Molly tripled our impressions again. And so as we went through, I can't, Brandon, actually go back and republish things from 6 months ago because they were terrible. When I look back at what I did 6 months ago and I thought was a good post, I mean, it looks like a white belt and now I'm a blue belt. You know, you look
Yeah.
at the front kick you thought was really good when you were 7. You look at that and you look at the video and go, I'm just gonna burn that one. And so what's been interesting for me has been I do have a tendency to focus on the algorithm because I want to reach people. But I've probably had, I mean, my numbers are way down. You know, I'm going from regularly getting 1,000 impressions to getting between 3 and 700. And my
Mhm.
engagement is, somewhere between 5 and 20, depending on the post. It's not as high as it used to be 60 days ago. And that's a common story.
Mhm.
Yeah.
But what I have found is that people are seeing the stuff anyway. People are actually, when I connect with them, saying, "Oh, I've been following you for a while. Really glad to be connected." A guy he was the CEO, worked directly with the CEO of a global corporation, said, "I've been seeing your stuff. I'm so glad you reached out." And I look at myself as a small player. So I feel like all 3 of us are kind of describing different versions of imposter syndrome,
Mhm.
which does seem to be very common in the PR space. So I've got partly over my imposter syndrome because of that organic Dustin, we love your stuff. You know, that's helped me. Brandon or Lindsay, I mean, you're more at the beginning of your journey, Lindsay, but what is helping you get over your sort of any imposter syndrome issues you may have?
Yeah, I mean, I can sort of start because, I think in any scenario where you have experience, so from in my perspective, finding a job, whatever that was, whatever time frame that was in my 20-year career has not been a challenge. It is, I've always had a pretty strong resume. I have a great sort of network of people. And this time it's been more challenging. So that has sort of been layered on top of when I'm thinking about content. The other piece of it is I have moved into corporate communications from having a PR background. So that means I cover now executive, which is sort of a little bit the same, but and employee communications. And so
Um,
I don't want to pigeonhole myself in one of
mhm.
those lanes because communication still is defined so differently. And now I'm hearing this word mixed-channel communications, which is great if everybody uses that term, but
First time
I
I've
don't think
heard
it's
it.
a keyword on LinkedIn yet for a skill set. But
Sure.
so that also, from my perspective, because I don't want a hiring manager to see a post where I write all about, media relations, let's just use that as an example. But the job I applied for is employee slash internal
Mhm.
communication. So
Sure.
that has also been sort of a little challenging from an imposter syndrome perspective. I think that both of those two things combined sort of linger, and I don't want to be too much of an expert in one thing, but it's like a, master of none kind of thing. And you get into
Right.
that sort of,
Sure.
but it's hard. I mean, it's just every industry, every profession, everybody
Right.
feels the imposter syndrome, and it's good to have people around you to build you up and remind you who you are. And I would not use social media, LinkedIn especially, as sort of the validation of your expertise. And I think we all
It's
we all
we all
we all
do
get
it.
fault when you post them. I'm like, I had a great post a few weeks ago and it got very limited likes. And I was just like, okay,
Right.
fine. I still think what I wrote was smart.
I had a post the other day get 0 engagement for the first time in probably 6 months.
Right.
But I also had broken the algorithm 3 times in the prior 2 days, and I was sent to the bad PR person corner.
I don't think that was my problem, but anyways, it does it does contribute to all of
But
it.
it just seemed like it happens, right?
Yeah.
It does.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, building off of that, yeah, I posted what I thought was one of my top 10 posts of all time. I think yesterday, a story about AirPods never working when you need to use them, when it's most important. And I was so proud of that post. I think it got three or four, 3 or 4 engagements. It does show you. You just never know, right? You never know. And it's like you post it, you're ready for that bite on engagement, but it doesn't always happen. But yes, perfectionism, imposter syndrome, crippling for me. So I think that's part of what kept me out of this for so long. And I think a lot of that's developed working in comms and PR because if you get a number wrong, you get a quote wrong, I mean, it's over for you. It
Yeah,
feels like
that's
it
a
is
good
at
point.
least.
Right,
So,
right,
It's
you
not
do
usually
that.
though. That
Yes.
is the reminder. It's not usually over for you.
Yeah,
right,
exactly. Well, that's what you think. Like that's exactly that
Totally.
imposter. It's like, man, if I put the 7 in the wrong place, this screws up the company forever. So that
right.
that I think does affect a lot of communicators, at least that I've spoke to. So I could recover from that, but yeah, I think just putting something out daily, seeing engagement, seeing oh, people are engaging, even if it's a couple, even if it's 100, who knows what the numbers are, but it does kind of get you over that. And just real one quick point to your point there, Lindsay, about finding a job on LinkedIn. I learned a lot about this last year when I hired someone for my team. And it's the first time I've ever had to hire someone through job applications. I've run my own agency and hired them directly that way, but never through a company. So when I was going through the applications, it was eye-opening to me because you guess what the first thing I did was on every application. I skimmed the resume for like 2 seconds and I went to their LinkedIn.
Right.
And if they hadn't posted there, or it was like a very promotional, boring profile, I basically moved on. And I was thinking, you know what? That used to
Really?
be me. That used to be me a couple of years ago. But
Huh.
when
That was me in November.
yes, when you're swarmed with applications from communicators, the thing you're looking for is this person part of the conversation? Are they saying things? I'm not expecting them to get hundreds of likes. I just want to see them out there talking about how they think. And it was eye-opening because my standards for hiring someone, I wouldn't have hired myself 3 years ago,
Right.
even with 20 years of experience. But seeing someone in the game just out there talking, sharing their personality, that's what mattered to me. So totally, Lindsay, it's
Interesting.
like that,
It's
even just that regularity will affect the hiring
Mhm.
manager more than you can imagine.
it's so interesting. And I think too, have chosen very busy professions, right? Like our
Mhm.
days can go off the rails in a blink, right? So how you sort of think about your own brand and your own sort of LinkedIn when
Right.
you are drinking from a fire hose, at whatever company you're working for, whatever agency you're working for, your own, whatever. It is a wild world that we have chosen to put ourselves in here. And so
Yes.
I looked at my LinkedIn and I said, okay, I hadn't updated my description of my job, my most recent job. My titles were there, but I had applied to maybe a few jobs. It was the end of the year. And I was like, I wonder if none of those sort of kind of came to fruition because my LinkedIn was blank. I mean, the
Yeah.
stuff before that was, pretty robust and I had a posting pattern a long time ago, but I was like, all right, I'm going to update my LinkedIn. I'm gonna get on the horse. I'm gonna do this. And yeah, it's very interesting because it falls to the wayside. Your own brand falls to the wayside when you are living in it and drinking from that fire hose over and over again.
Yes. Well, and two, it's easy to feel like I was talking to somebody recently who has a really strong LinkedIn presence, and this person's content was copied by somebody else.
Mm,
Probably 92% word for word, and the structure was the same, the order was the same. It's hard to be unique, right? How many of us have said some variation of relationships don't matter, or relationships do matter, or they matter this much? I mean, that's a constant conversation on LinkedIn. Or how many, Jacqueline Sales, great person over at Next PR. She had a post that said, don't go for the New York Times, go for those mid-range pubs. Carly Martinelli talks about it. Lizzie Harris talks about it. I talk about it. Brandon talks about it.
Oh yeah.
And somehow Jacqueline's piece got like 3,000 engagements or something. I was like, I had the same topic like 4 days ago. What the heck? But
It's not fair.
what I'm learning is, and this is an analogy I've started using recently, is it's easy when you're working out, when you're in your, when you're a young male, you're in your 20s, you want to work out and get stronger. You think it's all about the gym time. You don't realize it's the day off. It's getting good sleep. It's the diet. It's how much water you drink. I think LinkedIn is the same. You have to get the post up. If you don't have the post, you don't have that foundational content. But then if you're not, I actually have started to retrain my brain to not worry about how many engagements I get because I'm DMing. I'm adding new people just to flood the zone with new connections. I'm interviewing people. I have a piece up today where I interviewed Brad Gorman, who's former GM. He's a former GM guy. Annie Marie Squeo, who's former Xerox CCO. And I interviewed Trish with Verint. These are people I only know through LinkedIn. But that seems to be one of my secret sauces is I get myself published 3 times a month and I interview people. Brennan was very kind to give me something for a piece that PR Daily's publishing in April. I don't think I stand out necessarily on my posts or how much engagement I'm getting. But I think that Brandon, you're a pithy guy. I think my secret sauce has been being able to just flood not just the posting zone, but all the other potential ways of gaining that engagement in other ways. Again, similar to the weightlifting analogy of diet, water, rest, sleep.
Yeah. No, I mean, this is why I'm here. Like you reached out to me, we engaged, like
Same.
that's the part that I fall short on. So I've done this in phases, and it goes back to your initial question there, Dustin, which I deflected on, I guess, unfortunately, about commenting, but I'm getting back to it. So yeah, I mean, my first goal was I got to post daily, Monday through Friday.
Right.
And then I was like, I got to post every day. So that's where I
Mm-hmm.
recycled posts to fill in the weekend because I'm not going to work on the weekend unnecessarily on LinkedIn personally. So then I checked that box and I've been running that wave for quite a while, feeling good about it. But yes, the thing that I need to do is follow your example, which is you're an elite commenter. I even have a bookmark, a whole set of these are the accounts I want to follow. These are the ones that I want to engage with regularly. So I've already done all that work. Like I've filtered it down to the 15, 20 people. It's just a matter of me buying time out of my day to say, let's do this. And you have to do that because it's not fair to just put your stuff out there and expect people are going to engage when you don't. So I definitely, that's my biggest challenge. It's just a matter of prioritizing it. I know it's important, so it's not like I'm fighting against it. I just have to put it into my flow. And the other thing I'll say real quick, Dustin, you mentioned the people you've talked to. I have started recently just sending out more connection requests, like just randomly. And I have picked like the elite of the elites, chief communication officers at insert Fortune 500 company. I cannot believe how many of them accept them like within 30 minutes.
All the time. All the time.
And I'm not giving a personalized introduction. I'm doing it off the power of my job title and my content and my profile. And I'm just like, I'm not worried about all that because right now that's a distraction for me. But I'm like, I'm going to just reach out to 15, 20 chief communication officers at these massive companies. And you will not believe how many people will accept your invite if you're not salesy. If they see this person's in comms, I'm in comms, they're not going to try to sell me on anything. They want to network.
We
and
have
it's amazing.
12 connections in common. Don't forget.
Yeah.
You have at
which
least
all
6
of us
connections in
do
common.
at this
Right.
point. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
So that is a great little hack. Like, don't be afraid. And then you're popping up in the feeds of these elite leaders in the industry.
And I've actually found that I've actually taken another sort of in the shadows approach. So I will send a LinkedIn in-mail to people to just so it isn't this like, cold connect, right? So I've been trying to do that with my job search, but also sort of trying to build my network. I was just saying this yesterday. I have gotten no responses to any in-mail that I've sent. So I'm thinking to myself, why are we even doing this, right? I think the connect with a note has yielded way more responses, but it's hard because you don't, right? Again, a little bit imposter syndrome, also a little bit of generational. I don't want to be rude and cold call you on your LinkedIn. But I've found that the connect and add a note has been much more effective to people who I want to actually connect with than the in-mail, which has proven to actually have yielded almost no responses to people. And I don't know what it's like on the other end. I mean,
I think in-mails do come across a little not salesy per se, but you just rinse, wash, repeat. Whereas again, I have a little bit of a different approach here because I'm looking for sales through LinkedIn. Right. So I'm not just looking for one job, I'm looking for 30 jobs. Technically. But when we first started doing this, my colleague Jalissa and I, we picked the 200 people or whatever the number was, and we did the same message. It was definitely a bit salesy. I mean, the whole thing is you're supposed to comment and then follow somebody. And 2 months later, we just skipped all over that. And we went right to, saw your post, really enjoyed it, or thanks for the comment, whatever it was, right? That little intro. And then it was, would love to connect, to talk shop. and because my firm supports other agencies. Would a short call next week be a waste of your time? And I took that last line from Chris Voss, the FBI hostage negotiator who writes about negotiation, because then I'm telling somebody, yes, I'm in this for a sales pitch. But if that's not okay with you, it's no problem. You're not going to, it sets the stage for them to feel comfortable saying yes, because I've already said I'm willing to say no and given them that opening. So to your point though, Lindsay, I mean, we probably had a 60% acceptance rate for connections with a
Yeah.
fairly aggressive DM,
Yep.
a note attached to a connection request.
And
I
I'm also thinking like the InMail, I have more space to write because that
yes,
no on the connection it goes by very
100
quick. But
characters.
as a communicator, I should be able to get my point across very quickly.
Yep.
So
Yes. So let's pivot a little bit. We've talked a little bit about our own journeys.
Mhm.
PR people last 2, 3 years have been really hard. This year was looking promising. I wrote on this for O'Dwyer. It's pretty promising, but the tariffs seem to be creating some hiccups, shall we say. Let's look at how communicators going forward. Let's expand maybe beyond LinkedIn a little bit. Strategically, we're all communicators. We're all trying to come out of the shadows. One of the things that I think is a benefit of posting on LinkedIn is you don't have to worry. Like, I'm trying to get myself into PR News, PR Daily, PR Week, Clear Markets, whatever. That means I got to write it for that outlet. I got to tailor it. There's a lot more work to that than just posting something on LinkedIn. I feel like a lot of people just start, as you said, Brandon, just start posting, right? And over time, that voice will come together. And eventually, you're going to find that you've written, in your case, Lindsay, let's say you wrote 3 posts about PR, 2 posts about marketing, 3 on internal comms. And then you say, wait, I now have one long essay
right.
about the whole nature, and that becomes its own LinkedIn post. So let's talk a little bit about strategically how people can use their own posting to create that sort of billboard for themselves. So
Yeah.
Lindsay, go ahead. Go ahead,
Yeah,
Brandon.
go ahead, Brandon.
No. Yeah. I mean, I just have a few thoughts on this, really. I think one of the things I'm trying to do is now that I've got this backlog of content and thoughts, I'm trying not to lose them. And part of it is recycling it every few months, right? Just to keep it in mind. But yeah, I think there's a lot of opportunities to adapt the formats. Like one thing I do want to play around with is recycling some of the better performing posts as short videos. I've not even investigated that world. And now you hear people saying that LinkedIn video, it looked like a thing and now it's being
No, it's
penalized.
not.
So yeah, now it's not. So I'm like, maybe I don't
Ugh.
need to do that. But yeah, content reuse and adaptation, like even taking some best performing posts, like I've been thinking, the next step of this thing is to create some talks or like some short like video segments based on the best performing posts, adapt that to more of an in-person audience, a webinar audience, something like
Yep.
we're doing here. So just it's like what's that? Publish once, use everywhere. I'm trying to think. His name's Ross Simmons, I believe, who pitches that. But yeah, it's some version of that is what he promotes, and I'm a huge fan of that now. It's like if you create it once, you can use it forever.
Yes.
So that's what I think I'm trying to think about is how do I take the content I have on LinkedIn and how do I use it to accelerate even more opportunities? For instance, I had one of the PR tech providers I talked to today reached out to me about being on a webinar for them. And I was like, this is random, but it's because they're seeing LinkedIn
Right.
and they
Right.
picked up on some stuff I said about AI and they
Yep.
said, we think you could talk about this. And they're like, can you create a presentation on it? And I was thinking, I probably already have 90% of it in LinkedIn. I just
Right.
need to
Right.
change the format. So I think a lot of us need to realize it's like a content generation zone,
Yep.
but you can use it for the thought leadership like you, Dustin, Lindsay, like in your formats, like figure out different ways to expand it and increase your thought leadership outside of LinkedIn. That's kind of where I'm looking now. I'm still
That's
super
smart.
early, but I'm having fun with it, so I have no agenda. We'll see what happens, but
Sure.
but yeah, I mean, the opportunities are there. You don't need to lose the content.
Yeah, and I would just add, I mean, I think about it in a very similar way, right? I think the sort of online webinar, like this format is so great because you can really expand upon the sort of
Mhm.
snippets of content that you're putting together, snippets of thought leadership. And I love writing. Like, that's what I always wanted to do when I was a little kid. And I'm always like pinching myself, that's what I get to
Mhm.
do. But I actually have found, actually, most recently through this interview process and stuff like this, is I actually like to have conversations more than I like to write. So thinking about video content, my commitment coming out of this is right. Like I've been doing the comment strategy. And so I am going to start posting daily, but maybe one a week is short form video. And then the other piece that I would add is, Brandon, I think you were talking about it. Now that you sort of have a social media team, you kind of wanted to put the money where your mouth is and walk the talk or talk the walk, whatever. But Substack is something that I feel like we have been recommending to a lot of people and exploring, and we, talk about it. This is another, similar, but not quite. So that is something else that I've been considering, and there is a lot of white space on Substack. So that is something else that I've been, to your point, a little bit longer form. But also now they can support video. So it's just an interesting other opportunity to explore. And then the other piece is sort of Blue Sky and sharing little smaller snippets of content there and just seeing if there's an opportunity for some more decentralized social media off of LinkedIn. But I think to your point, creating the content in one place and then using it everywhere is it's what we tell our clients. It's what we tell our executives.
Right.
It's what we tell our firms all the time. So
Mm-hmm.
we should do it for ourselves.
One of the tactics that Molly, the brand consultant we hired, advised was when you make comments, ones that do really well should become a post.
Yeah.
So I've actually used that tactic. But one of the things I did recently was I had a piece on media bias. It was a humorous riff on media bias. And I said, I'll pitch this to Allison at PR Daily. What the heck? I pitched her and she said, sure, but your post doesn't sell it. You got to make it better. So she made me kill my darlings. And Brandon, thankfully, was willing to be involved in the piece I wrote. But to your points, I don't think I do that well on a planned video. I actually, doing a LinkedIn Live, once you get past the nightmare logistics of actually making it happen, is easier for me, even though it's just this is going to be an hour-long commitment plus prep, probably maybe an hour and a half total for me. That's easier than trying to plan a 1-minute video.
Yes.
I am horrible.
100%.
I posted about it the other day. My first TV appearance, they literally told me, don't move. And so I sat looking like this for 12 minutes and did not move. Whereas here, like I have a microphone, we all have to have our microphone in our backdrop. But beyond that, like I love riffing. It's so much easier. I got into writing, Lindsay, because I knew nobody was going to pay me to speak. And so I went the other way. But being able to repurpose, I mean, LinkedIn Lives for me, I'm starting this month, I'm doing about 3 a month on different topics with different people. And that's partly a repurposing effort for me. It's repurposing the relationships, is repurposing some of the content, it's using the platform in a different way. And what I'm surprised about, Brandon, you're able to repurpose it for this webinar you've been asked to do, is I know Perry and Becca, you brought them up earlier, Brandon, they have their new podcast. I'm not going to try to match what they're doing.
Yeah.
But most people aren't being interviewed and they're not doing LinkedIn Lives. I think that helps me stand out to my audience, which again is the PR industry, the marketing industry, the public affairs industry, just making those connections and building that credibility and building the relationship. So Brandon, I'm really glad that you suggested being able to use your LinkedIn, how that's turning into a webinar and how that's being able to be repurposed in other ways. And Lindsay, you're going off platform with the different digital tools that are available. So to anyone who's watching, how can you think about if you were a client, right? If you helping your client come out of the shadows, what are the 3 things you would recommend that they do with their current LinkedIn content?
Good question.
You're asking the audience, right? Not us.
No, asking the audience. I'm not trying to ambush you all.
Yeah. Okay. Like,
But just for the record, for everyone watching, we didn't plan the questions here. We're just sort of riffing as we go.
To your point, Dustin, I mean, I would watch this if I wasn't on it, right? This is my favorite type of content. So it doesn't matter who's on this. I'm glad you're doing it and others need to do it. And yes, Becca and Perry, of course, I watched their first episode. Brilliant that they collaborated and it's going to be great. There just needs to be more of this. And I know there's a lot of PR podcasts out there. I don't really follow them closely. I tend to like to listen, but have the video on if I want to engage with it in a key moment. So I really like this format. But yeah, I mean, this is way more fun. Imposter syndrome goes away because you have to speak in the moment, right? You have to show up for that hour versus, maybe I'll get to my keyboard and type something, So and honestly, your insights are typically a little sharper when you're saying them without a filter, of course. So I think we all realize that, but yeah.
Well, I think too, you in 2020, so I have 5 kids under 7, and we didn't learn until I had child number 3 that I have a sensory overload issue. So with child number 2 was with a little baby, and I was just losing my mind from the crying. I was trying to like do the deep breathing, and every time I did a breath, there would be a cry. Just as I started to calm my heart rate, it'd be like an electrical shock to my ears, and I was just about to lose my mind. I mean, it was not a good situation. So I set up a weekly call with a bunch of other dads who had kids under the age of 4. And I found out that I wasn't the only one. I found out, and again, I think that millennials and Gen Z do a little bit too much of the, woe is me, this is what I learned. There's a lot of that sort of angsty stuff out there. Facebook, LinkedIn, I'm sure elsewhere, but I don't follow the other platforms. But I think what we're talking about is a little bit different because when you have, I thought I was the only dad who was ready to lose his mind. I found out that lots of dads have that challenge. And it didn't make it easier for me to have it per se. So I had to work on myself and improve. But it made it easier for me to not think of myself as the worst possible parent out there. And I think when we're talking about imposter syndrome or how to come out of the shadows, we're not talking, oh my God, no, everyone should help me come out of the shadows. We're not saying, woe is me, we have imposter syndrome. We're just saying, we're identifying everyone has a little bit of a different pain point. My imposter syndrome is, man, I don't have as much engagement or as much sales as I want. Lindsay's might be, I don't know what to say, and I'm looking for a job. Brandon's is, I just want to have fun. Oh, wait, how do I have more fun and do a better job? We all have our different types under that large umbrella of imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
No, and I think you nailed it too. It's like there are these forums and this is what they're there for. So I feel like you've done an amazing job, Dustin, of being a connector to this. And so I also think imposter syndrome sort of goes away because you hand selected us, right? So there's something about both of us, speaking
Ew.
for Brandon. I'm sure if like 10 people said no before you reached out to me, but I mean, I'm taking it
Nope.
as
No, I've been
I'm
very
taking it as
fortunate.
I
Everyone I
don't have
reached
to
out to is
worry
saying
about
yes.
being an imposter. I don't have to feel like I have to pretend like I have all of the LinkedIn thing figured out because I don't. And we've had this conversation, right? So I think that and you're a little more vulnerable because, I can't see everybody. I see that people are commenting on my phone, right? So that's great. But I love this. And I think talking about formats, the podcast format is really brilliant. But this makes it more accessible, right? Like, you think about how you're going to pitch your executive to be on a podcast. It takes time, right? But this you can sort of spin up in a relatively, there's always a time commitment, and thank you for
Sure.
putting that together. But I think you can do this in a relatively way. And I would much prefer to engage with content like this on a regular basis. So I think what you're doing is great.
So, well, I'll take all the compliments you want to throw me. So I don't know if I'll be able to fit out that door when I leave my office. So we have about 15 minutes left, and there's been a few comments, but no real questions. So I wanted to jump
Okay.
into, Lindsay, you talked earlier about you have sort of, you're looking for jobs that have a lot of different types of communication under them. Brandon, you mentioned the same thing. I'm lucky. I'm a PR guy. I'm the PR hack, right? But one of the things that's very common, right, when we're all doing storytelling, if I'm writing an op-ed that has 6 different points, that looks like 6 different points until I put that intro, the headline and the intro together to put it all under that one umbrella. So let's talk maybe a little bit about creating those I don't know, those top line messages that we want to get across, right? For my case, it's we fill gaps for PR, marketing, and public affairs firms. So yes, we have, Blair Huddy does a phenomenal job of talking about her client stories. She's now been putting out, what's your biggest success of the week? Someone else, I think it was Cassandra Cabell, put out a post about thanking reporters for specific coverage that
I
month.
saw that.
I asked her for permission. I'm
Yeah.
stealing that one.
It's a
And
great
so,
idea.
that's a great way to talk about, what you're doing and how you service. So, and in my case, the way that we position ourselves is we're solving the pain point of someone's out sick, someone left the firm, someone got promoted, and we need to fill a gap for a day or a year, right? And we're going to fill that gap. So that's where a lot of my messaging is ordered towards, with all of those different disparate posts under that.
Mhm.
Lindsay,
Mhm.
what's the way you can think about yourself that top line message that you want to get across? And then how does your LinkedIn strategy come from that?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, I think it's like I was saying earlier, my friend was like, why don't you just create your content strategy like you would for a client? So I have spent a lot of time thinking about sort of what my unique, not really unique value proposition is, but
Sure.
it's hard. I mean, we're all communicators. We
Mhm.
all do the same thing. We're all storytellers. And Dustin, you and I had this conversation. I think it really triggered something for me to consider, which is, you know, I think the concept of a chief communications officer is relatively new. But we
Yeah.
talk a lot about having a seat at the table. I have been very fortunate to have a seat at the table. I have worked with founders when I had my own firm, and then in both of my in-house positions, felt like I had a seat at the table. I felt like the people I worked with valued communication, so I have sort of the the opportunity to see how it works in a well-oiled, well-valued, option. So my perspective is, how do you stay there, right? Like how do you keep that seat at the table? And so
Mhm.
all of the sort of points and content that I would create would sort of continue to support once you get that seat at the table, which I think we all want. How do
Mhm.
you maintain that? How do you show value without sort of showing value? And I've seen a lot of posts about, and this was the one post I made a few weeks ago, which is, the CEOs don't think that their communications team is prepared to handle a crisis. So it's like,
Yes, that's right.
how do
Yep.
you sort of lean in without actively showing that you're leaning in? And I think
Mhm.
that's a piece that I've sort of inherently understood and have been good at. And so that's kind of where I sort of see my brand on LinkedIn going when I
Yep.
start posting on LinkedIn every day.
Gotcha.
Can I ask you one question about that, Lindsay, before we go
Sure.
to Brian, which is
Yeah.
when you're doing that though, you're talking to communicators.
Yes.
So how does that translate to talking to the C-suite in your case? Because this is a conversation I wasn't part of until last summer after the Axios report came out about the survey of
Right.
CCOs getting more responsibility. I've now written about it a little bit for PR Daily and elsewhere. And one of the things, as you said, is there seems to be a communicators talk this way, C-suite talks this way, and they run parallel instead of crossing at the right point. So how are you turning that language into speaking to the people who are going to be hiring you?
Sure. Well, I think it's a little bit of it's both, right? Because I one thing that I think we fail to see as communicators is once your C-suite has sort of indicated that they need to see the value, that's a really hard hill to climb, right? So my hope is that I can actually help communicators preempt that by giving them the tools that they need. But
Mhm.
to C-suite, honestly, I have to say that until people, this has been my experience, right? And I can't say this is true or not true, but in my experience, this has been true. The people who I have worked with who value communications as a business strategy tool have
Mhm.
worked with good communicators previously. I think that the C-suite who have not had and maybe, because I do think that there are communicators who sort of are just happy to get a seat at the table. And so maybe that comes across as not having the confidence, going back to imposter syndrome.
Mhm.
Um, they
Hmm.
haven't experienced a communicator that will help them see things through their lens. And that's a hard battle to fight in the trenches, right? So it's
Mhm.
not I don't know that the content on LinkedIn, and I also don't know many C-suite at a very high level, Fortune 500 companies who are spending a lot of time on LinkedIn. If they're posting, it's most likely their communications team. There are some
Yeah.
outliers, right? So my hope is actually to arm communicators with how to preempt sort of the ask for value, prove your value to me conversation rather than try to convince the C-suite that communication is important. I think you either know that inherently or you will learn it at some point when something bad happens at your company, and
Sure.
then you'll figure it out. But it's that one's a hard one for sure. I've just been really lucky that the C-suite I've worked with, they've sort of just known the value of communications off the bat, and hopefully my involvement helped them see even more value. But they sort of came to the table with sort of a general
That
understanding.
knowledge. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, there's two topics that have been front of mind for me. So AI and PR is something I've really keyed in on, but the other one is exactly what you said, business results from comms activities. And I did a circuit through all the tech providers. Some of them reached out to me based on posts I wrote, some I did proactive outreach to, and just try to get a feel for how they help you report on the business value of what you're doing. And I was disappointed in all of them
Yep.
still. I mean, they're still terrible. We all have our metrics that we use and that get us by. Share of voice and, you know, share of spokespeople was one I like, and share of
Yeah.
authority, which is something I created for these are the tier one outlets we want to own in this industry. How much are we owning that? You know, there's all these different ways we can do it, and it gets us by. But when it comes down to down to it at the end of the day, it's like, what is the pipeline value that I've contributed to in PR, and how do I without making up absurd claims, how can
Mhm.
I report on that? And I've talked to a lot of people, developers, software providers. It's just not there yet, but
Right.
I have been tempted for years to figure out how in the world can I spin something up with someone and make something to do this, because it's just like it's so obvious, but it's so hard, and that's why it hasn't
Right.
been done. But
Yep,
yeah,
exactly.
we need to. I mean, if you have a solid way to do that, you have a seat at the table. And to your point, Lindsay, I've always been in a good situation with companies I've worked with where they respect comms. I can't
Mhm.
imagine if you're basically viewed as just, order takers that they don't contribute anything. So I don't have to solve that problem based out of a need. It's just I want to solve that problem ultimately. It'd be great to say,
Right.
here's the value of what I did. Isn't everyone happy about it at the boardroom versus we saw your blog post or that trade pub mention and yeah, great. I mean, that's really where the conversation ends. So that problem will be solved. I hope AI gets us there, but
Yeah, I was gonna say I think AI might help us solve that, but the attribution for this work is it's hard. And I mean, I go back to
yeah.
like my early days in PR, and Brandon, I don't know if you had this, Dustin, you were probably a journalist at the time, but I used to have a ruler at my desk. And I remember joining my PR firm. I was
Mm,
like, why do I have a ruler? And I was like, oh,
mm.
because I will be literally measuring media hits and then multiplying that by advertising value equivalency, right? I mean, a ruler.
Oh, yes, yes,
Yeah.
yes, of course.
An
I
actual ruler.
oh,
I was like, I did not sign up for this math-oriented job. I was told I was going to be writing press releases, but
crazy.
I had a
I,
ruler.
that's so funny. When I made the transition, I was a political journalist. So my first clients, freelance clients, were in political space. People in politics are like, oh, I always want to get in the press. There was no need to be like, oh, the value of PR. And then I got into the business space because, we start your firm. I don't have a White House background. I don't have, Senate communications director. My first agency was my own. My only in-house roles were one person shops, and I was that person. So I don't have any of those experiences in that background. So I've been doing this, bootstrapping it all the way. And the first people I went to in the business world, I said, oh, our tagline, and we put you in the press. And they said, why? And I said, to put you in the press? And I realized, oh, put you in front of your target audiences. Oh, great. Why can't I do that through marketing? Oh boy. It took me 3 years to learn how to say, we add another tool to the marketing and branding toolbox,
Right.
and it benefits all the other tools.
Mm.
It took me 3 years to learn how to say that. And to everyone's point here, what was the name of the collective? M something collective. It's part of some of the bigger PR firms formed it, and they announced Marker Collective. They announced they weren't going to be using potential reach and other metrics
Yes.
as success
Mhm.
anymore. And I remember reading this. And again, I run a little agency. I'm a little guy in the space. And I was like, I haven't used reach in like 7 years. Why are these major firms now just making news for making these changes? To your point, Brendan. And so I think really it's a combination of two things. On the tactical level, we got a client once into the Washington Examiner, Newsweek, and Fox News Digital in like a 3-week period, and they got 120 hits to their site. They had no SEO. The social media person was part-time, and they had no donor funnel. So what we tell our clients and prospects is either we are air cover for you, or you have a robust digital marketing team that is going to drive that top level awareness down to the sale, whatever that end outcome is. So I think on a tactical level, that's where we're going to have to try to make that delineate that line of thought. The other one, and again, Brennan and Lindsay, you have the corporate experience, I don't. Is there a way to show, well, companies that have that communication strategy go from 25 to 50 million, or companies that at 50 million invest in a different way, that's when they hit 100 million. do we have those stories that the industry can tell to our corporate, C-suite colleagues?
You're gonna
I
have to,
wish.
yeah, I know. I would defer to Lindsay because she's probably been in the corporate world more than I have. I'm mostly been in the independent agency world, so this corporate
Oh,
world's
sorry.
relatively new to me. No, but even then, it's like, kind of on the scale up side, not on the large enterprise side, at least right now. So
Okay.
yeah, I'm not aware of that case study,
Mm.
but I want to read it. Can someone write it?
I mean, I think it's sort of it's not the inverse, but I do think it becomes more difficult to grow a company from that 200 to 500. That's actually been my experience. So for the last 4 years, I was at a company that essentially grew 200 to 500.
Mhm.
No corporate communications person prior to that. So it was really the start of the introduction of
Sure.
communication strategy, and then we grew that much. Do I think it was because of a communications and my work? No, but it enabled some of the growth that potentially happened. But I don't think you can grow that much without a communication strategy. So it's like if you're going to grow that much, and
Hmm.
you want your company to grow, you need to have sort of your bases covered, because you're opening yourself up to way more, you're exposing yourself to more markets, more customers, all those things. And so I would love to be able to say that single-handedly my communication strategy did that.
Sure.
But I think that would be really hard to do. And I think it just has to be a part of the scalability of a company, as they get into the growth stage.
So we have about 5 minutes left. I would love to actually end on risks
Hmm.
to, coming out of the shadows, right? So
Sure.
for me, we have most of our PR and marketing clients are politically left of center. We
Mm.
also have a huge swath of clients who are in public affairs who are either right of center, or at least right now we're trying to hit right of center messages to reach the Trump administration. So I have this risk of, do I say this political thing, or I just did a piece on how to get in when Trump is sucking the air out of the newsroom, how to still get press. And that was a little bit risky. I think it worked. Interviewing people helps. It kind of reduces any pressures on me as the author. But it was a risky piece to write because people are so politically sensitive. And again, I have two different audiences, a little bit left of center PR marketing people and right of center public affairs firms. So that's a risk to me when I'm engaging on LinkedIn, is how to write the right comments, how to engage in political, cultural, tariff conversations. That's the big risk for my brand.
Yeah, I'd say for me, it's that's obviously more loaded than anything I'm involved in. So that
Oh,
that is a trickier thing for sure. I can see how that would be something you have to triple check in your brain. For me, it's more, um, I think it relies on comms principles. Like we know how to communicate something without getting yourself in the mud. Like I can tell a story without, implicating someone or a company
mhm.
or making someone look bad or a competitor or something like that. Like you're never going to see that in my posts. And 2 years of doing this, I think I've navigated that fairly well. Although I try to be brutally honest and share things, I try to
Sure.
anonymize them where I can. So I haven't been called out or had issues with that, with my company or with anyone I know. But yeah, I think this is why you shouldn't have imposter syndrome for this type of work because we already know how to communicate in a way that's not going to be harmful. So just do it for yourself.
Right.
That's really what it is. I mean, most likely, you're not just going to default to saying something stupid or embarrassing. You're going to run it through that comms filter and
That's a good point.
know where you can push it and where you need to lean back. And I think for most of us, when I'm looking at, my feed is filled with PR people, of course. I
Right.
see everyone taking risks, but I don't see anyone going too far. I
Right.
think they know just enough to lean on it. So risk for me is not really a big thing, but yeah, certain industries, I would definitely triple check what I'm posting. Like for you, Dustin.
Yeah, and I think, you talk about comms principles. You can't be everything to everyone and do it well. And so
Hmm.
to me, I think about risks. They're not huge risks, but I sort of talked about it earlier, which is, communications is this big umbrella. And so I don't want to spend too much time. I don't want somebody to get the impression that I'm only internal or I'm only PR, right?
Hmm.
Um, but at the end of the day, you can't be everything to everyone, and I'm not going to solve every hiring manager's,
No.
challenges.
Sure.
And so I think it's a lot about being true to yourself and really figuring out sort of what your strengths are. And also a risk is coming across as inauthentic just because that may be the topic of the day. And I do think that
Sure.
people can see through inauthentic posts more than we probably know. But
Yeah,
again, you can't be everything to everyone. And we say that all the time to our C-suite, to
clients.
our clients. So again, we should be
Yeah.
telling ourselves that.
Yep.
Right. I have to be really beyond the political side. You raise another risk, Lindsay, that I'm aware of and I have to be careful of. I have a LinkedIn whisperer, Jalissa, I mentioned her earlier. Literally, we have riff calls. She does a lot of driving for different things, and I'll just text her, riff call. Yep. She'll be driving. We'll do a 5-minute riff because I'm a talker, not just like on calls, but like all the time. And so I do take a daily breath, of course. And so what ends up happening is I'm trying to write it down. I'm trying to grind through it. I'll call her and she'll interrupt me. Stop, write that one down. That was your best idea. But she also says, Dustin, you're talking about something that's irrelevant. Is it on point, right? Because I did a few hot takes last year on some stuff. It did pretty well.
Right.
But do I want to be known for hot takes on the Jaguar rebrand? Not really. That's kind of off brand.
Good example. Good example.
Good example.
And again, someone like Blair Huddy, she had an anti-Jaguar reaction, then a pro one. And that's
That
part
was
of,
a pile on.
yeah, and she had a really good take on it. For me, I have to be careful that I don't talk too much about marketing because I'm a PR person. I don't want to talk too much about corporate. I mean, I'd love to contract with in-house teams, but I don't want to overstate my corporate comms knowledge. It's about that big. And so I really try to stick within that PR world because if I get too far, then I am trying to accidentally, Lindsay, be all things to all people.
Right.
And that really dilutes. I mean, again, I'm seeking sales. That really dilutes brand value.
Sure. I agree.
So, all right, I got about 1 minute and then I have to jump actually. So this has been a lot of fun.
So fun.
Because we didn't
Yeah.
prepare this ahead of time, I was a little nervous.
No.
Thank you very much, folks. It's been a lot of fun.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And Lindsay, you got a new follower, and I'll be watching
Oh
you
yeah,
closely.
I'm so excited.
Ever since we got connected, I connected. I'm like, great.
I saw, but you can be my accountability partner and make sure that I'm posting every. I know Dustin well, but Brandon, you're my
okay.
guy now, and we're gonna
I'll
come
do
up
it.
with that attribution model and save the day.
Please, and retire on a beach somewhere. Yeah, for
Sounds
sure.
great.
We need to do it. Yep.
Well, you all enjoy the beach. I got 5 kids. I can't afford a beach yet.
Yeah, that's right.
Someday.
Folks, this is so much fun. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thanks
Enjoyed
for
it.
organizing.
Yeah.
Bye, everyone.
Take care.
Bye.